A very good evening to all of you, and good morning to those of you who are in the US or in other countries. I can see Krista Badwin, Indu, obviously, our speaker for today. She is from Boston. Happy to see Yatindra. Aishwarya Lakshmi seems to be attending for the first time. So, this is our 47th consecutive session since we started last year on 10th of May 2020. And we have been having these webinars at 11 a.m. in the morning, but today, because our speaker is based in US, Indu Guzman, so we decided to have it at 6 p.m. India time. Yeah, happy to see you, Krista, and everyone else also. So over to you, Indu. The topic for today is differences between US and UK English.
I just realized I was on mute. So anyway, thank you for the introduction, Vivek, and to ICF for having me speak again. So I'm just excited to be here for another fun, engaging talk, and specifically about the differences between British and American English. And this topic is something that I'm really interested in because I have to think back from what I remember because I grew up with British English. Even though I live in the US right now, my family, they moved from India when I was a baby, and I grew up in Dubai. And I went to Indian school there. So I was basically raised, taught, the British grammar conventions and spelling and all of that. And then when I was about 10 years old, my family moved to the United States. And that's when I first encountered American English. And I did notice the differences right away, too. Like, obviously, the accents. Then I did start noticing pronunciation and all those kind of things. I remember, like, when I was first new to the country, it was an English class, and we had this exercise where the teacher will write a sentence incorrectly, and you correct it in front. So I raised my hand and I went up. Then I corrected, color to UR, and all the British spellings, and all the kids were yelling, "No, that is correct. You changed it wrong. You don't need to fix." They were yelling that. The kids in the back. The teacher actually kind of said, actually, and used that to explain the differences between American and British. And that's when I realized, oh, then I kind of realized it because I was still used to the spelling. And even when I was in high school too, I used to do this as a joke from my English teachers. I would write in the British spelling just to see if they'll notice or say anything. Most teachers didn't say. They were like, "Oh, I know." One teacher did say, "Oh, I noticed that you do that too. That's great." And that teacher pulled me aside and talked about it. Asked me, "So do you grow up with this?" Or asked me about it. And she told me it's fine that I use British English in the papers, but just make sure it's consistent because there were some mistakes I did. I didn't keep it consistently. And she wanted to make sure that I understood American English too because I'm in the United States. So that was something I used to do. So right now, as an editor, my professional background, I used to be a high school English teacher myself, and before I went into editing. And most of my editing is, general interest, nonfiction, and some fiction. So I guess one of my other editorial specialties is translating between British to American English or vice versa. And I have edited documents, usually corporate documents, that are meant for the UK audience for a financial company. I've edited fiction that has dialect. And I think some time back, I gave a talk about the different dialects. And I think some of you came over there. So it's always been a fascination for me to see how English, translates around the world. So speaking about, the American English took its form. I mean, obviously, like 400 years or 500 years ago, when the first English settlers came to the United States, they brought the language too. And then the language kind of evolved on its own. For example, the settlers will find new words, new things, and they have to make up words for it. For example, moccasin, coyote, butte, which is like a hill with a flat surface. So they made up words for it too. And then also when the US started industrializing, and I guess in the 19th century, they started forming their own school systems and I guess corporate culture, their own words went their own way. And now it became distinctly as US English and American English. And, there's saying, that the US and UK are two countries separated by a common language. And here the question is, how different are they exactly? And I think there was somebody who predicted in the, I can't remember the name on top of my head, the 19th century, he predicted that by the 22nd century, Americans and British will not understand each other because languages diverge so much. Unfortunately, that is not entirely true because the thing he didn't predict was technology, the internet, and globalization. And you can also see how globalization has an effect on each other. For example, American English has its effects on British English too, and vice versa. And especially now we have to think about it in a global world. What does it sound like? So I'm just kind of curious, out of curiosity, what kind of editing do all of you do? You can just type in the chat. Let's see. Do we have any fiction or fiction editors here? Anyone? A few. And some of you probably do medical editing, legal, or academic editing. Those kind of have their own conventions. I'll be mostly talking about general, just for a general audience kind of editing. And of course, specialized topics like medical or journals, they have their own conventions and style. So, and then you got fiction too. I enjoy editing fiction because that's when you get to break the conventional style. But in order to break the rules, you kind of have to know what rules are you breaking. And then someone mentioned marketing communications editing. That's an interesting field. I've done that myself too. And right now, I was a freelance editor for about 7 years, but now I just got a job in publishing. So at Chalice Press, I'm actually their marketing and production coordinator. So I do a lot of marketing and communications right now. So it's a different area, but I wanted to explore that. And I get the best of both worlds because it's a remote job. I get to work at home. And it's kind of funny. The office is actually in St. Louis, Missouri, and my boss lives in another city. So we have 3 different time zones we're working with. And this is one of the things about the future of publishing. It's right here. It's like everyone's working remote. So that would be interesting to see how it happens. And I do enjoy working at home though. So let's see here. And I did 2 different types of editing too. I'm thinking of the ones where I did translate between the 2 versions. I did some editing for marketing collaterals for a multinational financial corporation. They were translating some of their collateral for the UK audience. And they just wanted to make sure all the conventions were similar. And since it's more of a business or professional type of writing, I didn't see that many glaring differences that may cause confusion, only like spelling and grammar. Like, for example, program was spelled with the M-E, organization was spelled with the S instead of the Z, or said as they call it. And then also USD, like I had to mention, like when mentioning dollars, do they need to put USD, like 10 million US dollars? Because when you just put the dollar sign outside the US, you can't assume, most people grab it, understand that it is US dollars. Then another type of editing I did was fiction, where they were both British and American characters. And I just had to make sure the dialects were, consistent, and the dialects were easy to understand. And what else? And for example, we could tell if there were like differences used, you could tell by the context. For example, I think one of the characters talks about pudding. The American character was confused. It was like, oh, thought he was talking about us. In America, when you say the word pudding, we think about a certain kind of a dessert, like a custard type. It's not generally used to describe all the desserts, all types of desserts. So that was one thing too. When the Great British Baking Show came on, I remember several Americans were wondering, pudding? Why are they talking about pudding all the time? The British must really love their custards. But what they meant was pudding meant all desserts in a broad sense. So these 2 projects are like 2 completely different needs. So that's, whether you're working with American or British English, you're really you follow the same concepts of copy editing. For example, You want to talk about, hold on, like I was saying, you want to follow the same good practices of copy editing. You want to make sure whatever you use, it's consistent, clear, clarity, like the sentences are clear and it doesn't cause any confusion or potential misreading of the text. So that is what we'll talk about. What are the differences exactly between the British and American English? Obviously, the first thing we notice is the pronunciation and accent, consonants, spelling, vocabulary. I mean, those are the first things we do, and tag questions too. Culturally, it seems like the British tend to use more tag questions. A tag question example is, it's a lovely day, isn't it? Are you having a good time? Right? And since culturally tag questions are used more, I remember one of my coworkers when I worked at a store during my college days. She was an older, lovely English lady, but she used to use tag questions very frequently. And a lot of coworkers, we all noticed that, but she got mistaken the tag questions. She was just trying to be friendly, and that's just her I guess. But a lot of the American coworkers confused it. They thought that she was being passive aggressive, and some people got put off by that, and you could see how misunderstandings happen. And then other things are collective nouns. How do you deal with collective nouns? Auxiliaries, and past tense verbs. I mean, there's a whole lot of differences we can always look up in our reference guide, but these are the ones you want to really pay attention to if you're editing between the two and ensuring consistency. For example, the first thing is different words. For example, you live in a flat or an apartment. Chips or crisp. Those are the crunchy ones you get from the bag. Or French fries or fries. They call it chips. But interestingly, though, in the US, a lot of restaurants, they call it fish and chips, not fish and fries. And when you say fish and chips in a US restaurant, you will get French fries with fried fish. So they just kept that. And then you'll say the movies. I'm going to the movies tonight. I'm going to the cinema tonight. And here's one for soft drinks: soda, pop, Coke, soft drink. Depending on where you are in the United States, the word differs. In the UK, I heard it's fizzy drink, soft drink, or cola. I will remember a funny incident when I was traveling. I think it was Malaysia Airlines. And, they had the beverage service. I'm half jet lagged. So she asked me what I would like to drink. And I just said Coke. She just kind of looks at me funny and says, "Excuse me." And you got that feeling like you said something wrong. So I wasn't sure how to ask about it. So I said, "Oh, Coca-Cola." And she goes, "Oh, cola." And she takes it and gives it to me. So I'm kind of wondering, when I said Coke, I wonder what she was thinking. I can only imagine. Then we got sneakers, tennis shoes, in American English. And in British English, we use the word as trainers. Trainers? Most of these words, depending on the context, it's most people can understand it. What are the differences in trainers? If somebody hears the word trainers, you would think of like a fitness trainer, like, a personal trainer at the gym, or somebody like a trainer, like, for example, you are at work, new job, and somebody's there to train you to do something. You do. And then here's another one that could cause potential confusion, depending on which part of the pond you're in. Drugstore. And that's not where you buy illegal things. That's where, like, say you got a headache and you want some aspirin. You would go to the drugstore. And they have like those kind of, they sell prescriptions and also over the counter, and then random things like soap, shampoo, and those kind of things. In British English, you'll say the chemist. That is like not at all recognized in the United States. When you say chemist, most people think like a chemistry lab. Windshield. For cars too, different words. Windshield versus the windscreen. And then we have soccer versus football. So that's an interesting. Why do US call it soccer instead of football? Because in the US, when you say football, people think of American football. And the rest of the world, football is soccer. So here's the history behind that. And it started in the 19th century. Most of the universities in the UK used to play different types of football. And one version of it was called soccer. So when soccer, the sports kind of got caught on with the US universities too, So they started playing that version. And they called it soccer. And that was the only version that stuck around the US. And we still kept it. So they called it the soccer. Football, another game was developing too. And that game, what we call American football, it started because there was one game and one of the players carried the ball. So from there, it turned into football, or what I should say, American football. Then you're wondering, why do they call it football? You're using your hand and you're throwing. Actually, they are kicks in American football, so that's why. Derived from football. So I think people still kept it. So that's the part that confuses people. And now here's another one, school vocabulary. And most of you, when you're watching American movies, especially about the high school years, you might have heard of sophomore, freshman, junior, middle school. What does that mean? And I remember even reading Enid Blyton books or Harry Potter. They would talk about first form, fourth form, fifth form. When I first read that, I thought fifth form, they must be talking about fifth grade. What 10-year-olds? Then I was reading the story, I was like, wait a minute. These kids sound like they're much older than 10. So if you're working with educational texts or young adult novels, this will be something important to know. So the school years, same number of years, 2 to 4 years. In the UK, they call it nursery or playgroup. In the US school, they call it daycare. Playgroup in the US isn't really a school where you drop off the kids and they stay there with the teacher. Playgroup is usually described where parents get together with other parents of young children around that age and they play together. That's kind of what we understand as playgroup. And then 3 to 5 is, they call it reception. In the US, it's called pre-K or preschool. And then age 5, that's what we call kindergarten. And then that's, where did it go? Year 1. And that's where the year 1 starts. Then when they're 6 years old, it's year 2 in the UK, that's first grade. So it'll go 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade. And that's what they call elementary school. It's also called grade school. Grammar school is not widely used. It's more like, say, Boston and New England area. But that's what's understood usually from kindergarten to 5th grade. And here, of course, in the UK, it's primary school. And it keeps going until it'll say year 1, year 3, year 4, year 5, year 6. And that's what they'll call junior. First year junior, second year junior. And I think that's what they call the juniors. Then they would go, in the UK, they would go on to secondary high school. Secondary school or high school. In the US, they don't really call secondary school is recognized. Most people understand what it means, even though it's most not used. They would call it middle school or junior high school, depending on where you are. That's 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. And here, that's where the form gets me. The first year of high school is called first form, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And that's when they finish. They're about 15 years old, and I think they'll do the GCSE exams. And that's something I didn't get, like GCSE and A-levels, because we don't have something like that in the US. So students go into high school in the 9th grade, and that's what they'll say freshman. 10th grade is a sophomore, 11th grade is a junior, and 11th and a 12th grader is a senior. Then they would graduate and go to college, or what we call post-secondary school, to get their bachelor's degree, if they're choosing to go to college or trade school. The UK, however, there's a lower sixth form, lower sixth and upper sixth, the last 2 years. They call it like first sixth, I know what is FE college and sixth form. And that's again where there is potential. The names can be a little different. College in the US means post-secondary, when you're going to get your bachelor's degree. That's what most people will say, college. And sometimes people use college to refer to graduate school too, but some people will say I went to grad school. So, and here in the UK, when you're talking about post-secondary education, it would be university. So, and I remember another time where there was a little mismatch. Another person who just moved to the United States, I think she was from Scotland. She was talking about her kids, and she was talking to her kids about juniors. When she said juniors, I thought, oh, okay, they're 11th graders. So I was thinking about 2 11th graders, or 16-year-olds, or 17-year-olds. But she was talking about juniors, the younger children. So just for the kids, I didn't understand, catch it on until halfway through the conversation. I thought, well, she must be really overprotective of her kids. Then later I got out, wait a minute. I asked, how old are they? Because she said their kids went to an elementary school. I'm like, wait, if they're juniors, how come they're going to elementary school? And I asked her about it, and she explained it to me. I was like, oh, that's what you mean. Then I had to explain to you what juniors mean over here and how I thought she was talking about 2 teenagers. So that's school too. And then other school words you want to hear are, parents will say, how are your marks? Or how are your grades? I got an A or a B. So grades will be more US, marks, probably UK. And then recess. Usually for young adults, students take a break. The break is the UK, I guess. Recess is more US school. So here, and then some differences. I'm going to move on to vocabulary. But before I move on, does anybody have any questions? And the way I do that is I like to answer questions right away. So you can post them on the chat. I can answer it right away. So any questions at this point? Yep, okay, just after this talk, I will have plenty of room for Q&A. So the vocabulary is, of course, different, and most people recognize that. So one thing about vocabulary is it's the same word, but they have different meanings. So that's something you want to watch out for when you're editing. And of course, as editors, we're always looking at, oh, I see somebody has a comment. Krista, what's your comment? Oh, let me unmute you. Sorry, you're muted.
Yeah, okay.
There you are.
Can you hear me now?
Oh,
It's one thing I especially find with British people, they really love jargon. And so and also the American jargon, people could just say year 9 or year 4 for everybody, and then nobody's confused. So when people are in international teams, I would prefer that they would, I mean, it's fun to learn this in this webinar, but it's one thing that as we're working more internationally, people could be more aware of. I don't think it's normally a problem with Indian people, because Indian people are so used to communicating. Like Canadians too, we have to learn all the different Englishes. But yeah, I just wanted to say that because British people are always using jargon and acronyms. So
that's true in every country too. So good comment there. And that's a good point that Krista brings up. When you're editing, you want to consider the audience. If it's just specifically to a US audience, we don't have to say year 1, year 2. Though California, they still say year 1, year 2 instead of grade. I've heard that in California. It really depends. I mean, if it's just for a US audience, we just don't have to say, we can just say freshman, sophomore, junior, and most people get it. But also in the US and college too, especially undergraduate college, they have the same thing. It'll follow again. They'll say college freshman, college, whatever. I've heard British too, like they'll say 6th form, depending on who you're talking to. But definitely you want to make sure who it is you're speaking to. Let's see any other comments. Payment be sidewalk? Yes, it would. And they call it playtime too. Yep, I've heard that. Yes, definitely true. So let's talk about vocabulary. The same words, different meaning. Homely in the UK means down to earth or domestic. In the US, if you say homely, it means an ugly person. The US equivalent would be homey. Nervy. Be someone who is nervous. In US, it means somebody who is bold or full of nerve, cheeky. Pavement. UK, traditionally, they called it a footpath. In US, it could refer to where you walk, but also road surface. Describing when you're talking about the road surface. So, yeah, and some of those, they kind of cross over, depending on where you are and who's using it. Then here's one, pick off. In the UK, it means to scold. In the US, it means to irritate or anger someone. And then rubber. UK, it means an eraser, something you use to erase pencil marks. In US, it means a condom. So if you mistake that, that's where potential embarrassment can happen. Or pudding. That's another thing I mentioned earlier. In the UK, desserts. It just means like, what's for pudding? It's basically saying, what's the dessert menu? In the US, it's a specific custard type of dessert. From what I've heard recently in the UK too, it depends on which region you're from. So some people use desserts, and someone else told me that desserts in the UK, when they say pudding, they mean like the warm kind of desserts, like say flan, custardy kind, and things like cheesecake is different. And of course, Vinita brings another good point that the British influence in India is definitely there, and I've seen that quite a bit. And Indian English, that was fascinating from ICF because you can see like how the language kind of was brought over by the colonization, and then Indians kind of made it their own and formed their own dialect. And then we have same word, but they have an additional meaning. For example, cute. Talking about kittens, puppies, little babies. But in US, it can be used in that context, but also to describe an attractive or a charming person. And you see this a lot with adolescents. Adolescent girls will say, "Oh, so cute." But usually, and sometimes younger women too. But some men have complaints that, "Don't call me cute, it's just unmanly." I'm like, come on, a girl's noticing you. What's the problem? But girls, I noticed that especially the younger women, whatever they like, they just call it cute. Another thing I could say in casual conversations, I'm trying to remember. Another thing girls say is like somebody, "Hey, do you see that fine guy over there?" That's another way to use it. So good. Just the general context, nice, fine. Then US, it also means valid. Like these tickets are good. The offer is still good. Or this coupon is still good. Regular, someone who is consistent or habitual. In US, it also means regular or normal, like say regular size soft drink. Frontier, I always think of the Wild West. It means a wild open space. And in the UK, it means a border between two countries. You have that additional meaning as well. And smart is another one. People think an intelligent person. That's used both ways. In UK, it also means well-dressed. So to dress smart. Here, you wouldn't say dress smart. It would be more like dress professional, dress casual. And then same word, difference in style, connotation, and frequency of use. Autumn. Commonly used, all style. In the US, people do recognize it. They would kind of consider it poetic, formal, but still understood. And here's another one, clever. Common, it's very common and it's a positive trait. In the US, when you say clever, not quite as common and has a negative kind of connotation, like clever, the person's kind of slick or sly. Fancy. Would you fancy some tea? Would you like some tea? Fancy is not used at all. Fortnight. Again, it's common in all styles. In the US, it's uncommon and kind of thought of as old-fashioned. Perhaps. UK, very common in all styles. US, I've heard it too, but it's formal, but not quite there. Most people say instead. And row, to have a row, means it's common, means to have a fight or get into a squabble with someone. In the US, we don't use that at all. Row means, you're rowing the boat. That kind. So, of course, there's a lot more words that are different. Okay, and let's see here. Any other comments? Pudding in the UK. Oh, it's formerly called afters. That's good. That's good to know. I heard of that too. And smart in Pakistan means slim. That's an interesting way to see it. So here's one with vocabulary tips for us copy editors. There's just so much. I would say stick to one. If you're picking US or UK style, kind of try to pick words that are consistent with that for the voice. And sometimes the word is okay, but try to ask yourself if the meaning can be determined by the context. Because there may be some reasons why a writer would want to choose certain words because they want to write a certain voice or a character. So that's one thing. If it's not understood by context, that's when you want to highlight it in query. And you want to consult a dictionary. Merriam-Webster is the preferred dictionary for US. an Oxford dictionary. And as copy editors, we're always looking at words to see, does it really fit? And have you ever found yourself doing this? You look at a word, you know it's right, but you're kind of looking fixated on it. You're constantly looking it up. You're wondering, does it sound right or does it not? Could there be other words? It's what we do. You, my sister, too. She once told me, oh, you just overthink things. I'm like, that's what we do. That's what we, that's what copy editors do. And then peer sourcing. Now, thanks to the internet, we have Facebook groups such as Across the Pond, or EAE, short for Editors of Earth. So if there are some questions and you feel like you cannot find in a style guide, or you need to talk to someone who is from there, your best bet is to peer source. And I found some great comments too. I remember I was actually editing something and it had some Hindi words in it. And I'm not a native speaker of Hindi. I'm South Indian. I was able to ask questions. What does this mean? And is this the right way to say it? So you could ask questions too. And Across the Pond is really interesting because you hear a lot of conversations. Then you want to consider the style and the tone of the text too. If it's meant to be casual, you want to avoid words because some British words can be thought of, some people interpret that as too proper, too formal. So make sure it fits. And I think, like Krista said earlier, if the international audience use words that both have in common, that can be understood by both, or clarify if you need to. And for short form text, that is where you really need to focus. Like say if you're doing marketing or communications, like headlines, you want to avoid words that could cause potential confusion or misreading of the text. Example, fancy dress party or event. How is that interpreted? If I just saw that, the most in the UK or Europe, you would think a costume party, like Halloween, where we dress up in costumes. However, fancy dress is not really used in the US at all. And most people, when they think of fancy dress, the interpretation will be like, oh, it's a party where I get to dress fancy. Fancy means formal. So you might have people who show up in that. So you could find a common word, like, for example, costume party, instead of that. And then there's another one too for wedding invites or invites. They will say business attire. Instead of saying dress smart attire, you could say professional attire because that would make more sense. Formal attire. And formality also has different shapes. And here's another word that is not at all recognized or used. For example, a solicitor or barrister. I was reading an article about one of the few Black barristers in the UK, talking about diversity in that field. So I was like, barrister? What is that? So from the picture and then from the article, I was able to figure out, okay, it has to be somebody in the law. Then I had to look it up and find out what it means. So for solicitor or barrister, or if you come across words like that, you might want to you could add a subtext to clarify for short form, or change the terms to common, like legal practitioner, legal expert, legal department. Add pictures or a photo if possible. And you want to add context to the text, depending on the reader or audience. And if you're not sure, you might want to, as an editor, you can query with suggestions. You could say, would this be understood by the audience? Because international audiences may interpret it differently. For example, a solicitor in the US, the first thing people think of is a door-to-door salesman. Person who tries to order business orders with advertising, knocking on your door, asking, that's what a person thinks of, or somebody on the phone calling you. But it is also used to talk about a chief law officer of a city, town, or in the government, only in the government department. Barrister is completely uncommon in the US. Most people think it's old-fashioned, but they don't know what it is. But the term over there is used counsel. And I know the legal profession, if you're doing legal editing for either the US or the UK, they have their own terms that are used within their field that are not recognized. So they may still use some of it, but this is just in a general sense. Like I was reading one book, Shamed, a memoir, Shamed. And it was a person talking about how she needed to go see a solicitor. So from the context, I could tell, okay, it was a lawyer. I mean, story was taking place in the UK and a UK publisher. So they stuck to that because we could tell the target audience was the British. So in the UK, solicitor is a member of a legal profession. So they deal with drawing up wills and other legal matters. Barrister seems to be a certain type of lawyer who practices as an advocate, particularly the higher courts. I mean, we would still kind of call it as a lawyer here in the US, or counsel. So those are things you want to think of, where there is potential confusion. Let's see here. Let's see here. Yeah, 2 weeks is what they would say too. Every 2 weeks or bi-weekly. That's what we would say, fortnight. No. So good suggestions there. So keep the discussions there. So spelling too. I'm just going to go through it really quickly, but this is the common ones you want to pay attention to. Words ending in OUR or OR. Color, color. Favor, favor. Honor, honor. Odor, odor. So that's one on the right is British and American. Then OU versus mold, mold. That's the British spelling and American. If you put mold in American, it could be misinterpreted as shape something. Then we have mold, mold, molder, smolder. More words. The AE, for example, anesthetic, anesthetic. Encyclopedia, encyclopedia, foetus, fetus. And center, the ER words. Centers with the RE, that's British spelling. Center is the American. Fiber, fiber. 1 liter, liter, meter, and meter. So if you're editing with these, it's just good to be aware of the spelling, but it really depends on who you've got different style guides will have their own. So follow whatever style guide you're doing. An abridgment, an abridgment. Acknowledgement, acknowledgement. The extra E is taken out. Judgment, judgment. Though I have seen like it mixed between the two. So, I mean, the point of this is there isn't really, it's not, these are like not really hard rules. It's kind of like more sometimes, it's just guidelines to make sure whatever you're editing is consistent across. And you have reasons for it. But, you can always, you'll hear differently or things change. So then, defense, the CE. Defense, defense. License, license. Offense, offense. Pretense, pretense. And all the meanings, it's the same. And then ISE versus the IZE. Apologize, apologize. See the capitalize? Things are different. Dramatize, naturalize, and satirize. And then you have double consonants too, like counselor, counselor with a single L. This used to confuse me for a while, but and sometimes when you're first new to it, it sounds wrong or incorrect. After a while, people realize, okay, that is how it is spelled. Libelous or traveled, double L. But then in the US, they still keep some words, they keep the double. For example, fulfillment. The single L is mostly UK. Fulfillment is 2. And an installment that has double L. Well, and it's still. So it's just like something you would notice. So when you're like trying to figure out which one to use, I would read through the text and try to see if there's a pattern and look at the style guides. That. And then another thing to notice is punctuation. Also, sometimes authors may have their own preferences. They want to use British English, but they prefer the double quotes. So these are things you want to ask and outline them in your style sheet. Like quotation marks. In the US, it's double for dialogue, it's single for quotes within the quotes. In the UK, it's single. For example, first is the US preference. We are often told that there is not enough money. So you see in the first sentence, there's a comma here. That's definitely something from Chicago Manual of Style. And whether to put the comma or not, that's more of a style issue. You see there's a double quote, and the period, full stop, I should say, goes inside. I mean, that's the preference for US. For UK, I've seen this, we're often told that there is not enough money. So you see that there's no comma and the period goes outside. But however, the period goes inside if the entire sentence is in a quote. There's not enough money. And these all are differences, whether to use the comma or not. Different style guides have different things. So let's see the questions. UK English double quote for dialogues. Yep, I've been seeing that too. I've been seeing that. Let's see here. Yep, that's been becoming more and more common. So these are again generals. Because I was reading, sometimes I do like to read books, get the UK version of a book, because publishers for some reason choose to publish a UK version and then they have a US version. I was reading Matt Haig's the Midnight Library, and I did notice a lot of single quotes. So again, it's a stylistic thing. And then here's the colon. Capitalization after the colon. For example, in the UK, it's always lowercase. There's only one problem. The government does not spend enough money on education. You see the is lowercase. The US, according to the Chicago Manual Style, the word that's after the colon is capitalized if it's a full sentence. If it's not a full sentence, it's lowercase. For example, you can see the second sentence. There are three important values: faith, hope, and love. And then here's another one, the serial comma. Use a comma here if there's an and. So that's another one too. Even within the US too, there are differences. And then punctuation. Is it Doctor Who with a period or Doctor Who? You put the periods after Mrs. or all these titles. And then abbreviations. Is it UNICEF capitalized or UNICEF? I know, like, definitely in Chicago Manual of Style, these are, right now, that is capitalized for organizations, but scuba, words like scuba, it used to be capitalized at one point, but now it's no longer. It's just become a regular word. And then also, do you put periods between UNICEF? That's, again, a style issue. Then number one, how would you abbreviate this number? Like this. And these are all understood differently. So the best practice is really the first time. So where did it go? The first time I would put number, spell it out, and put NO. And then when you follow number, people get the idea, okay, that's what it means. And people can fix it, of course. But punctuation, the differences are becoming less and less. All right. So now the next step is grammatical differences. That's also there. For example, past tense verbs. A lot of the past tense morphemes, they have become regularized. For example, dream, it'll be dreamt, dreamed. Oops. And I misspelled it right here. So it'll be burn, burnt, and burn, burned, with an ED. And dwell, dwelt, dwell, dwelled. Spoil, spoiled. So those are some things you want to pay attention to. There's always a few that are exceptions. So excuse me. That's something you definitely want to check. And then here's another one. Past part. Oh my God, I must have been really tired when I was doing this. Past participle, gotten. Past participle gotten is not used in British English. Typically in American English, it means to obtain. I've gotten a new car since I last saw you. I've gotten plenty to eat. I would say we have gotten home late last night. We wouldn't say we gotten home last night, unless it's dialect. You say we got home late last night. Or they have gotten me in trouble again. Instead of they got me in trouble again. That's also used. But gotten is very much unique to American. So if you have a British character in fiction, unless the character is very Americanized, this is something you want to make sure you don't have the character say that. And then auxiliaries. Shall, I should tell you later. That is, the word shall is not at all used in American English, except legal documents and in legal writing. And it sounds very stuffy and formal here. It'll say, I will tell you later. I shan't be able to come. I won't be able to come. I mean, this is even more rare. Should. In addition to obligation, should can also have a hypothetical sense among older British speakers. That is something I was not aware of. And now when I think back, it makes sense to me. I should enjoy living here if I could afford to do so. I would enjoy living here if I could afford to do so. So here then the US younger speakers. And then would. To express habitual activity. This is something that's not characteristic of British English. When I was young, I would go there every day. When I was young, I went there every day, or I used to. That's another thing to notice. Need or dare. You needn't be so rude. Most people will understand that in the US, but it's not commonly used. You would say, you don't need to be so rude. Do you need to be so rude? That's again used among both. I daren't tell the truth. I don't dare tell the truth. Do you dare tell the truth? So, the verb substitutions and deletions. The word do is substituted for a simple finite verb phrase, or repetition of a verb phrase from the same preceding sentence. What the heck does that mean? Example, John likes classical music and Mary does too. Instead of John and Mary likes classical music. Now, if you're having the editor's eye, well, up front, they mean the same thing. But when you say John likes classical music and Mary does too, you're trying to emphasize that Mary also likes classical music just as John does. So that is why that sentence construction is there. So depending on the impact the author wants to have, they may choose different sentences. So the worst thing a copy editor do can take it away, because that's when authors complain, oh, they changed everything in my text. So when you're making changes, make sure it is portraying the meaning and what the author intends to say. So again, differences in the verb phrase substitutions. Did John pass his exams? In the UK only, yes, he did do. That is very uncommon or could get interpreted as incorrect. But both countries, they say, yes, he did. Will you have finished this project by next Monday? Yes, I will have done. Yes, I will. To me, when I hear, yes, I will have done, it just kind of sounds unfamiliar. Like to understand, what the person's trying to say. Or you could also use them in sentences. I haven't thrown them out yet, but I should do. I haven't thrown them out yet, but I should. The do kind of just, I don't know. Kind of interesting how I see it. But that's just another difference. Which one? Which one are we talking about? Should have been like in the second sentence? Which one? Was it the previous one? I just want to make sure I don't make a mistake here.
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about John and Mary likes classical music?
Yeah.
Okay.
John and Mary like classical music.
Yep, you're right. That should be it. It's definitely a typo, but in colloquial language, that also works well. So yeah, but in standard English, it should be like. You're correct. Thanks for pointing it out to me. So let's see here. Any other questions? Yeah, that do and the, I would definitely say so, Krista. The do at the end is pretty interesting. I mean, it really depends on and think about the character too, how these it kind of makes you think of the kind of a person too. So when you're writing dialogue, especially, that's something you want to think of. Then more deletion. Where are you fired? Yes, I was done. To say, yes, I was. And are you working now? Yes, I am doing. Yes, I am. Doing, it's just used as a general replacement for it. Will you be cooking tomorrow? Yes, we will be doing. Yes, we will. Yes, we will be. So that's another interesting thing. I haven't noticed. I just noticed it a couple of times, but this is something I didn't really think about. You could say, I wanted to go, but I couldn't do. UK only. I wanted to go, but I couldn't. And then copular words: seem, act, look, sound. In British and UK, it can be directly followed by a noun phrase. In American English and US, it needs a preposition like. This is also used in the UK. Seemed like a long time. In the US and UK, it seemed like a long time. For American readers, they will feel like something is missing. So it seemed a long time. Oops, not like. And I guess sometimes my grammar picks it up and does it too. So that's one thing. So it seemed like a long time. He seems a smart man. He seems like a smart man. He seemed like a smart man. She acted a real fool. She acted like a real fool. So depending on where you are, it may sound familiar. Really? Doing is very unnatural for UK English? Oh, that's interesting. That was something I got from my grammar book. So it really depends, on regional too. That's kind of what I meant. Yes, Anna said it right. What I meant to say is, like, while it's not common, it's still used in the UK, but never in the US, because regional differences are there too. And you want to know, like, and that's kind of funny. I use both. Sometimes in Canada, we have these bilingual habits. Very true. There's regional differences too. And even especially if you go into the American South, my dialects talk too. There's a lot of differences that you won't hear anywhere else, and it just sounds uncommon. So again, that's the thing about language. And depending on what you're using the language for too. These are not like hard-paced rules. These are just guidelines, things to be aware of. And that is really more for, like, say, if you're editing creative nonfiction, fiction, these variances, because you don't want to, like, say, for example, the previous slide, the do. All the author wants it, and you take it out. You're kind of getting rid of the voice there. So that is something to be aware of. Prepositions. I'm going to the party at the weekend. I'm going to the party on the weekend. This is where it wouldn't sound right. And again, it depends on the region too. It's been so many years since I've actually been in the UK or been among. So it's like I had to look back and look at the style guides too. So what are you doing at Christmas? That kind of sounds odd to me as an American speaker. We would use more, what are you doing on Christmas? I have heard this on when I was watching TV shows. And then in UK, Monday to Friday. Monday through Friday is what they would say. Though I have heard Monday to Friday in the US too. Then collective nouns. This is another one I had to remember. When I was editing for that investment company, I had to realize, wait a minute, how do they use collective nouns? I couldn't remember on top of my head, and I had to go back. It's like team, faculty, government, and family. In UK English, they can take both, but most of the time, they can take a plural verb agreement. In American or US English, they take singular. My team is winning. My team are winning. These are, again, things that just sound kind of weird to where you are in the pond. The government is useless during the crisis. The government are useless during the crisis. Maybe it's not widely spoken in the UK, but maybe those of you who are living in the UK could kind of talk more about it. Do people really say on Christmas? Yeah. Yep. And that's the other thing too, like, good comment there, because most people, we tend to use both, and especially now we're getting more globalized. Everybody uses it, but for editors, we have to, we will notice it. And that's really what helps, make our editing work consistent. Other considerations. Time. 10 past 4 in the morning. When you want to say 4:10. We don't use 10 past. In the US, I heard 10 after 4 in the morning. And here's another one for potential confusion. Dates. When you see the date, 4/5/2021, does that mean April 5th or May 4th? But in the US, you put the month first, the day, and then the year. The UK, wait, did I say that? In the UK, it's the day, the month, and the year. It's just been that way. So you could, if you want to clarify, you could go for April 2021, for April 4th, and you always want to put the comma here, if the year. So that helps clarify. And especially if you are editing conference materials for international conference, say the conference is in the US. Even though it's located in the US, you're having people coming over from all over the world, staying for a short time. Habits are hard to change. So to avoid confusion, you want to put the dates, you want to spell out the dates to avoid confusion. But say it's just a very local conference, and most of the attendees are just from the US. It's not as important. And then numbers. NIL, nil, 0. That's very much a British. I haven't seen that commonly. I just heard the word say 0 or not for decimals. Like not, you say not 0.4, 0.4, and then for large numbers. Do you say 3010 or 3010? And 1,000 million for a trillion. Now, trillion is becoming more used in the UK too, but I've heard like a TV show describe 1,000 million. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I can do the math in my head. So that's another one. It's easy for numbers, especially. You want to simplify it, make it easier. Because of that, I think our British are using trillion. Oh, 1,000 million. Sorry, 1,000 million is a trillion. Oh, right. Thanks for correcting. Tell you guys are all editors here. Something that made me nervous. I'm like, great, I'm giving a presentation for editors. Sports score. Who won? The home team or the visiting team? When you say the score, 7-3. Who won? In the US, the home team is given last. And in the British, the visiting team is given last. So that's another thing you want to clarify when you're doing sports score. And describing money. Penny, nickel, dime, quarter, or $1. This one, my gosh, you're going to catch me and see how I do it. Penny is 1 cent. A nickel is 5 cents, a 5-cent coin. A dime is a 10-cent coin. Quarter is a 25-cent coin. And $1 is $1. You'll say $1, $2, $3. And then shilling, or 1 bob. And then we have 2 bob, 1 quid, and 5. So 1 quid is a £1 note, I think. And a shilling is, I guess, pence, 1 pence, 2 pence. Am I correct? So I'm trying to remember that because that confuses me whenever I'm, I think I was in Canada one time, and I think it was British Columbia in Vancouver, and I was giving cash, She said, it's what did she say? Toonie. It's 2 toonie. I'm like, what is that? She meant to say 2 something, it's just the currency has differences too, and you can use a lot of people. Yep, and I'll definitely be sharing some resources and websites, and you guys are also welcome to share it. So editors have style for US English. If you're working mostly in primarily in US English, these are some great resources here. The Chicago Manual of Style is considered the default style guide for US publishers, and it's very comprehensive. And it's generally used for general book publishing, sometimes corporate communications. And then they also have, they call it the AP Style Guide or Associated Press Style Book. That is mostly used for journalists and reporting. It tells you really focuses on spelling, avoiding bias, and headlines, those kind of things. And then the Merriam-Webster Dictionary. I use the online version. Who uses the dictionaries anymore? So that would be the preferred one. Fowler's Dictionary of Modern English Usage. It really explains a lot about why do we use certain words here in the US when it means something else, and why does something look correct to Americans, not to the British, or vice versa. So these are good resources right here. Looney, okay, Christina, thanks for explaining that to me. A loony, like when I talked about, is a $1, which has a loon bird on it. A toonie is a $2 Canadian. That's what it is. Oh, that's funny. That's very interesting. Thanks for sharing. Because I remember I was so thrown off and I couldn't remember it on top of my head because it was a while ago. And then UK English. This used to be called Hart's Rules, the Oxford Style Manual. And then we have the Oxford Dictionary of English. That one I've used online, but unfortunately online you have to pay for a subscription. But I use lexico.com. That works for me because it's free and it's most words I was able to look it up. And then we have Butcher's Copy Editing, the Cambridge Handbook for for editors. But there's like so many out there too. There's the Cambridge, there's the Time Style Guide, the Guardian, and in the US too, the New York Times has their own style guide too. And then of course we have health styles too. Most health styles are taken off of this. So let's see, Rifat, what do you have there? Is that the Hart's Rules? New Hart's Rules, okay. So that's the two. Let's see here. I think from what I understand, I used to know it as Hart's all this time too, but I think they recently updated it to Oxford Style Guide. So this is the newest version. But Hart's Style Guide, I'm sure it still works too, but that's what I have been told. I mean, I still have like what you held up. That's what I have too. Really, writers and editors. So that's what I was confused about too. So that's all I have for the talk today. I mean, there's a lot I could get into with grammar, but this is just things to be aware of because as editors, we notice things that most people take for granted. And it's very easy to take something for granted unless you come across, others. And it depends on the kind of editing you do. So yeah, I love to follow you. So go ahead and follow me. So right now I'll go ahead and let's see how take questions.
Yeah, thanks, Indu. And over to the audience for their queries.
Glad you liked it. It's really interesting too. Oh boy. And that's typos too. It happens to all of us. And that's one joke I've always told. I'm just going to go to the last slide. I told my friends, because how many of you have family or friends say, oh, don't judge me by my grammar. Don't judge me by mine, by my spelling. But we don't do that. I always say editors make mistakes too. And we're not jerks. We're just there to help, right? Okay, that means I answered all the questions. Someone's got to have a question. Or maybe anything you noticed about British or even Indian English, because it's been a while.
Oh, I have a question.
Yep.
This is about the difference in spelling depending on whether the word is being used as a verb or as a noun with S and C. So practice with S will be a verb, practice with C will be a noun.
Practice with a Z? I have never heard, let me see if I hear it correctly. For example, let me just put this in the quote. You mean?
No, I practice every day, so that will be with an S.
Yes.
But I'm out of practice, that will be with a C.
No, that's something I have never seen that like that.
It is pretty standard in UK English.
Oh, it is? Okay. Maybe that is something a UK thing, because I have not seen that. Thank you. And to advise and advice. Yeah, that is a good point too. Depending on whether it's a verb or a noun, that's something you definitely want to pay attention to. And that's a good example. To advise or to advise. To advise means, with the S, means you're giving someone advice. And advise is, here's some advice. But that's interesting. Practice, I have to take a look at that. I learned something new. So would you say it's quite common? That's what we call C and verb S. Okay. with the S. Yeah, that's a very common distinction practice. Yeah. And here's another interesting thing I came across too: the word advisor, advisor, and advisor. Two different things, right? So, yeah. Analysis, analyze. Yeah, in the US, I would say that's C. Yep. That's weird. Any
Yeah,
other?
I have one question. You mentioned the word homely, right?
Yep.
And you also mentioned, okay, Merriam-Webster is the go-to dictionary in the US. But the first meaning it gives is, a person, closely connected with home and cozy and all that. Okay. But you said that in the US, homely means ugly. Okay, not good looking. Is that used very commonly or?
No.
Yes.
I'm sorry, you kind of cut off. What was the last sentence?
Oh, no. See, when you said homely, in the US, it means not good looking, ugly.
Yeah.
But Merriam-Webster gives the same meaning, for both, whether it's UK dictionary or Oxford or Merriam-Webster, they give the same meaning for homely, at least the first meaning.
That's very interesting. That could be really the influence of, I would say, because I got it from here, where I looked it up, because I've heard homely. I haven't heard homely that much here. So I looked it up. They described it like,
what happened was when I saw your PPT, that was the first thing I saw. I just immediately opened Merriam-Webster and just had a look. So the first thing said the same thing that the UK dictionary also said. So I was a little curious.
That's
So
really
it's not so much ugly as plain.
or plain, or ugly in a plain, but kind of not particularly attractive.
It's
So
an
again, this depends
insult.
on-
It's
Oh, yeah,
an
it's-
insult for sure.
Oh.
If somebody's homely, they're not attractive. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
plain
their
or not
skin will be not nice. Yeah.
exactly. Or there's like nothing really special about them. Just okay. But the thing is, that's another question too about dictionaries will say something, but then perceived meanings too. For example, like where I lived, it could be regional too. I have not heard homely. It's always, homely is always, kind of heard as an insult. I've heard homely a lot. And that's another thing about, this is one of those things, being in there, something you want to ask native speakers to. Like recently, I was editing a marketing material recently, and they were talking about evolution, adaptation, when it comes to, and then the person wrote adaptation. And then I looked up the dictionary, I was like, is this correct? The dictionary said that it's an alternate spelling of adaptation. But when you notice it too, like, wait, this is different. The cultural context also, you have to look at it too, because technically adaptation is correct. But since you're talking about the context of evolution, readers can also misspell it. They may kind of interpret it as like, wait, is this a typo? They may notice it. So that's why I thought, let's stick to the more common adaptation.
Okay.
That is like really interesting too. And judgment, good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Judgment is used for the legal matter. And this is another book I used quite a bit to look at the differences between, this book talks about dialect all over the world, Scottish, Indian, difference between North America and British English. And that's where I got about.
Can you hold that book closer to I can't really see what it is. International English.
Sorry, I'm still sharing my screen. So let me stop the share really quick. It's this one here. It's from Peter Trujillo.
A Guide to Varieties of English Around the World.
Okay.
He's a linguist and he's UK based. So this may not be fully current because some of the words, and also the thing is, words change meanings all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the key is, trying to avoid misinterpretation. But that is really interesting. Let me just type this down. It's Peter Trujillo, and he's a linguist. In the case of homey and homely, some people may think, wait, this is incorrect. But then again, context. Context may have and also like connotations. And connotations to another point. Local connotations, they add different meaning to the text too. So it really depends on the regional. And this is just the interesting thing about language. It depends again. They have this term: are you a prescriptivist or a descriptivist? There's differences to in language. It's always changing. And also like how India, for example, homely could indicate domestic. I've actually heard, and I look at Indians too, talking about domestic, homely used. So it really depends on where you are. And if you feel like a word like homely is causing too much confusion, consider rephrasing it depending on who the audience is.
Yeah, like I was saying, in India, when they're advertising for a bride-to-be, they say homely girl, meaning, a girl who's going to take care of your home.
Yeah.
Or probably they want the domestic
They mean a
goddess.
person who's not outgoing, who's, going to be,
Yeah, the domestic goddess.
Like the domestic goddess.
Yeah, domestic, somebody who's a nice housewife.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I remember a joke, when Krista, when you mentioned that you are bilingual in Canada. Okay. I remember a joke. I was there in Canada in 2015 at the editors conference. There was a joke, people in the audience, there were some Americans in the audience, and there were a group of people on the podium. They were saying, we don't know who we are because, we use British and American spelling. We don't know who we are, but we are definitely not American. Okay. Then they were winking at the Americans in the audience. Okay. Now, when I think, at that time it was a joke, but today when I think about it, and there's so much of talk about Indian English. Okay. And Vivek has had a couple of meetings here. And even today, somebody said we use both British and American English. Okay. We are actually kind of mixed. We really don't know who we are. At least you're sure you're not American. We are still a kind of a mix.
Well, actually, and so I'm teaching some international courses like to engineers, and I always want to teach people how to speak in different countries. And I want to say, like, what's the dictionary for Indian English? And I say, well, I think like for Indian English, and then Africa also has so many different Englishes. So for Australian or Canadian, I can say, here's the dictionary. It's Macquarie's for Australia or Oxford Canadian. But for Indian, like, we need a dictionary.
Yeah,
because
Chris,
it's
Is there
yes, Vivek?
Oxford Dictionary of
Yes.
Indian English sometime back?
Yeah.
I remember when it was coming back like several years ago. There's that controversy, like, why do we need a different dictionary? Is Indian English really considered another dialect? That was like the question at that time. Is that still around, like the Oxford Dictionary of Indian English?
Krista, like in October, we had a multi-speaker session on the topic of Indian English, and one of our speakers, Robert Lush, he's actually working on building a database of Indian English.
Is it available like online or anything that we can consult, or do we have to wait until it's officially published?
For now, you will have to watch the recording of that session, because that database it's still in progress. But we are thinking of having a follow-up session on Indian English. We include some more speakers from India and from the rest of the world.
It would be interesting, but I'm not good at being awake in the middle of the night. So this is a great time now. But that's why I didn't come to some sessions before, is the time, because you have a lot of interesting. It's good to know there's a recording. I will look for it. Thank you.
Yeah, so there's some really interesting topics too. Even the last one for the Breaking Free, I wanted to come, but it's just early morning in my time. And somebody else brought another topic, like he passed out of college or something. That means that person graduated. In the US, when you say somebody passed out, it means they fainted or became unconscious.
Or they passed away means they died. So
or passed away, that means died. Yeah. And that's true too, like practical to have an English Indian English because variations are there, and it might take decades of century, or if not centuries. That's very true, and that's really, when I talk about history of how American English formed too. You know how it came from the colonies too. It became its own in a few years. And I think it was only in the 19th century, mid 19th century, Merriam-Webster came out. I think what other phrases are there used in India or anywhere that could cause confusion? I'm trying to think what else. Oh, here's one. Are you mad? It means two things. Are you crazy or are you angry? I mean, I think in the US, if you say, are you mad? Means you're angry. I guess in the UK, is it still the same? Like, are you mad? The person is gone crazy. Oh yeah, we're like this only. Definitely. Is that an Indian English? Wasn't there like a recording sometime back? I think I saw on ICF YouTube about Indian English, and I read some blogs too.
Yeah, Aisha had written a blog for the CIEP on Indian English, so that is something that whoever is interested in finding out more, they can check that out.
And can you share the link? Does somebody know the link for that? That would be very interesting.
Yeah, I think Aisha is there. She should be able to.
You're hiding in a cave far away.
Krista, I will send it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Homely meant behind. Oh, there's a homely comment. That's brought up a lot of comments here. What does behenji mean?
Thank you.
Somebody said, my college days back in the late 70s, homely meant behenji.
Indu, it actually you need to have lived in India and know Hindi and lived especially in northern India to understand some of these. It's like, Indians, they will say out of jest, or actually some will say seriously, they will say things like, my head is turning circles, which means mera sar chakra raha hai.
Okay, head is turning circles.
And
like similar.
That is only, you will understand that only if you know Hindi.
That's
And another one is, what goes of your father, tere baap ka kya jata hai. These are like typical humorous examples, of course. And but let me share with you, I worked in Genpact, which was earlier GE Capital in India, in their e-learning division as an editor. And there were two examples which we used to often discuss in the American, with one of the American clients. That fellow's father passed away. The Indian at our end said, I'm so sorry to hear about your father. And he replied and said, well, my father's dead, but why should you be sorry? So I don't know whether that's kind of happens, but it did happen in Genpact in GE Capital. And another example I remember, I think it was a brief about what we are supposed to do here. And at our end, we said, okay, we'll club this together. And the American at the other end said, why are you feeling so violent? Why are you using such words like club? So, yeah, so you learn. And fortunately, in all the 10 years I spent in e-learning in Genpact, dealing with American English day in and day out, I think most of the, once you've mastered your spellings and some of the regular words, or idioms which Americans use, then you don't fault. I've never had my copy come back to me for any such issue. So I think it's okay. There are plenty of websites available. Fortunately, I joined Genpact in the days of the internet. So it was good and easy. So
definitely. And also TV shows too really help, get an idea. And somebody else was mentioning that now, so the American TV shows, teenagers, even in India, are picking that up, some of the words. And we hear each other a lot more because now, and then somebody else brought a question. What about to vomit from Anna? In the UK, it's vomit or puke or throw up. Is it barf in the US? I would say yes, and all of the above. I've heard all of them are used, and they're all understood. Barf, I don't know. I don't remember if there's any specific group of people. I've heard it mostly in the Western Coast, California, Oregon, and now I'm living in Boston, which is the East Coast. I've heard mostly puke or throw up, but all of them are understood. What about sick in the UK? Like sick, it could mean a few things. Like, for example, are you ill? Like are you ill? Also sick. Somebody goes, that's sick. Yeah, you could say that. You could say I'm sick. That means you're just generally not feeling well. Now this reminds me, I saw this TV show, what's it called? Mind Your Language. It's supposed to be this British TV show about a teacher trying to teach an international group of students to learn English in the 70s in Britain. I remember there was like one character was a Sikh guy, from India, the turban and everything, and he was telling the teacher that I'm sick. Then the teacher was like, oh, Mr. Brown was like, oh, are you not feeling well? What's wrong? Then the guy was saying, when I say I'm sick, I'm not referring to my state of well-being. I'm talking about my religion. Oh, does anyone remember that show? That's one. Poorly for the US, it's depending on the context, it could be recognized, but it's not widely common. You mean like I am fit, I'm doing poorly? Is that what you mean, or what's this context?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
Rifat.
Hi. Okay, so no, like somebody will say to a child usually, oh, are you feeling poorly? Like, are you feeling unwell? Are you feeling under the weather? So that's a common English use. I'm just wondering if you have it in America as well.
No, I have not heard it. I have not heard it there.
Would you then, if you heard it, would you mistake it for, are you feeling poorly? Would you mistake it for, do you not have much money? Would it be
Yes, I
mistaken?
would.
Really?
Yeah, I would not recognize it. I mean, depending on the context, people can tell, but if I said poorly, I would think like poor. The first thing that comes to most people's mind is, not having money, or poorly. So that person might get confused a bit, wondering, what are you talking about?
Cool.
Or, I mean, generally most people can pick up from context, but some people cannot. It will stop them and think, what does this person mean? And then they'll realize, oh, okay. But poorly, yeah, get mistaken.
So plenty of comments in the chat box, plenty of interaction, very enriching session it has been, and it's good to see editors from all over attend today's session. If there is if you have any queries, any questions, any comments, please do share.
And you're also welcome to contact me on social media. I think I posted it there, but let me put it up. If you don't mind, I'll put it up again. Oops.
And next week, we have a very interesting session on podcasting coming up. The title is The New Age Audio-Visual Podcast Media, and the speaker will be Anku Goyal. So like a lot of editors, they have been doing podcasts. So I think this topic should be of interest, although it will be at our usual 11 a.m. time. And thanks, Indu, for doing 2 back-to-back sessions for us. Like last week, you did the third culture kit for our travel series.
It was really a lot of fun. I'm just glad. Thanks for inviting me again. It was really fun. It was really fun talking to all of you, hearing the comments, and I always enjoy it. Like a lot of interaction, a lot of good questions, and even I learned a few things myself. And also, feel free to, I'm always looking for feedback. I'm new to giving presentations online, so any feedback or any questions, feel free to contact me.
Yeah, and we are just a few sessions away from our 50th session, which will be on Perfected, and the presenter will be Daniel Human, who created this software which a lot of editors use for ensuring consistency in their work. So we are like really looking forward to that session. And before we end, any comments from Anna Nolan?
Thank you. you. I don't know what to say. I really enjoyed that. Thank you. Why are you asking me? Or are you asking everybody and I'm first in the list?
Yeah.
I don't know. Anybody else dying to say something?
I would love it if you could do more at this time of day because I would show up more often. But that's a small consideration.
Yeah, Krista,
Thank you for having
maybe we'll do a survey and find out from our participants what time they prefer.
Yeah.
If most
Yeah,
of
of
them
course.
prefer this time, we don't have a problem. We can change it, or we can have some sessions at our 11 a.m. time slot and some sessions at 6 p.m. We just want more and more
11 a.m.
editors
is a
to
bad
come.
time.
You'll become flooded with North Americans if you make it this time.
Yeah, I think the evening is a nicer time. The 11 a.m. on a Sunday is a little too early.
Okay, we will
Do both.
do a survey and see how it goes. Or we will have 2 sessions at 11 a.m. and 2 sessions at 6 p.m.
Yeah, because normally the 11 a.m. stretches up to lunchtime, and if you have to be in the kitchen, you can't do any cooking.
Yeah, I understand that practical problem, because now now that we end the session at around 7:30, there will still be enough time for all of us to prepare the dinner and have it at around 9.
In fact, sir, if I may add something, I really like the fact that we have more voices from across the globe and not just Indian editors here. That feels a little rewarding, and it feels like it adds more to your reservoir of knowledge. So maybe if the timing helps all of us get together from across the globe, I think it's a good idea. Just an observation.
Yeah, thanks, Garima. We will certainly consider it.
Yes, thank you.
There's opened a can of worms. Sorry.
I would definitely attend more too. Like if the timing is, I'm really not a morning person.
So thanks, Indu. Thanks, everyone, for joining us for this session. See you next week at 11 a.m. And for the travel series session on which we have on Saturdays at 4 p.m., which we will be having a session on cycling in the Himalayas, and the speaker is Dhruv Dogra, who has already written 2 books. His first book was on his adventure in the Arctic and the Andes. That was a 400-day journey. And the session that's coming up, it's focused more on his journeys in the Himalayan region. So see you again. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Indu. Thanks, all the participants. Have a nice day ahead.